Greetings, welcome back. This is part two of our series on understanding existential psychology. We're talking about immediacy, which you'll read often and hear often as the here and now orientation. And so we start with the idea of client histories. What is it actually useful to know about a client in advance? Almost any information can introduce bias. People refer as clients because they want to be helpful, but also because they want something from us. Schools might send us children hoping that we'll confirm an ADHD diagnosis. I worked at a low income clinic, part of my practicum, and I would get a phone call at least one a week from lawyers a city away asking me to diagnose a child with parental alienation syndrome, not a real diagnosis, in order to help with a custody battle. I was trained by a humanitarian aid organization to diagnose PTS in people applying for asylum, not to assess it, not to make an informed and objective decision about it, but to diagnose it. Whoever they sent, I was to find reasons to diagnose PTS. I was trained to take an extensive history from each new client, to include medical conditions, past and present, previous therapy experiences, and diagnoses, drug use, family history. None of this has ever proven helpful to me in the course of an existential therapy. Um, it's all prejudicial. We have the 10 session problem. It's easier to diagnose a client the first time you meet them than after 10 sessions of therapy. Because the first time you meet them, they confirm the biases that have been introduced from various sources. Your diagnostic biases, the diagnostic checklists they often bring with them because they've been sent by a commercial for a drug. After 10 sessions, you know the person, you know them well, and you don't just see the ways in which they conform to a diagnostic category. Clients themselves often want to discuss the past, and I will go wherever they lead, including history, but my job is not archaeology, it's psychology. So, what meaning is there in facts that we can uncover from a client's past? All right, concept number two is agency. Agency, we are not dogs. I'll speak for myself. I'm not a dog. I doubt that you're a dog. If you are, you can't understand what I'm saying. Let it go. A dog wakes up in the morning. A dog is itself. The dog does not think, today I will be a good dog. An honest dog, a helpful dog. I'll fetch slippers. I'll poop outside. I'll cuddle humans. I won't bark at the neighbors. The dog has no capacity to the dog has no capacity to think these things. No language in which to think them and no agency with which to decide about the future. They don't have frontal lobes. It's just full of dogness, right? Primary process with no mediation from the frontal lobes. All dogs are good dogs. All children are good children. They merely reflect their environments. A bad dog has problem owners, probably some problem in the environment. And a bad child probably has bad parents or something else about the environment. But humans, fully adult humans, we have agency. We're capable of decisions. I might wake up in the morning after a night of struggling to breathe and fighting with my APAP machine, and I might think to myself, I should lose weight. I might then draft a plan. Every successful plan amounts to eat a little less, exercise a little more, and then I might enact that plan. I'm not going to, but I could. I could. No dog and no child is capable of this. Refer back, go back a week to the givens of existence, freedom and responsibility. Dogs are not free because they're not accountable for their actions. They can only respond to environments. People are free because we can. We can account for our environments and plan for our futures. I'm too fat. I'm so fat it's affecting my health and quality of life. This is both my fault and my responsibility. I am free. If the client wants to discuss the past, what happened to them at some juncture ago, therapists might anticipate certain benefits. Number one is insight. The person might discover a cause, a reason for what they went through, and for why they do what they do now. I overeat perhaps because I had a lot of siblings, and in my household, if you weren't quick, you'd go hungry. Okay, cool. Number two, recapitulation. The person might tell a story and be met with appropriate empathy and care. The therapist might enact a role, such as that of the loving parent that was missing at the developmental age when the event occurred. Those are fine aims. They're an existentialist aims, but they're absolutely fine. Insight goes with psychoanalysis. Recapitulation really goes with Irvin Yalom and interpersonalism, is what he calls himself, an interpersonalist. And I mean, notably, again, I'm going to mention it probably every week. Yalom's not an existentialist. He denies existentialism as a standalone practice. So that's not. It's fine, but it's not to do with us. So when a client talks about their past, my main interest is not the thing that happened to them in the ago. It's what's happening for them now. So the third thing that we might expect that might be of benefit is a decision. Existentialism focuses on the agency of the client, protecting and nurturing that agency. If you get a chance to read The Art of Existential Counseling, Adrian Van Kam, it's beloved, it's out of print, tiniest bit hard to get. Really orients into that nurturance of agency. Agency means making decisions and enacting those decisions. When the person talks about the traumatic event, how does that affect them now? What is it like to talk about with me now? And in as much as everyone is shaped by past events, how would the person wish to be shaped by this event? When something happens to a dog, the dog is changed by what happened. It's only the person that can stop, think, and decide. Freedom, writes Viktor Frankl, is the pause between stimulus and response. And in looking for a correlation between happiness at age 65 and any other factor, George Vaillant, analyzing the results of the 65-year Harvard longitudinal study, found only one thing: decisions. Not health, not wealth, not religion, marriage, employment, type of employment, decisions. If a person had reflected on their experiences and made active decisions based on those experiences, they tended to be happy. And if they, like dogs, merely acted out the scripts life had handed to them, they tended to be unhappy. Our clients have come to us because something bad happened to them much of the time. But we can't go back in time and change the event. And honestly, if I could, I would not. All we can do is make a decision. In the light of this information, the thing that you're telling me from the past, who do you want to be? Topic 3, who's not in the room? One client wanted to complain about her husband endlessly. She came in once a week and sometimes twice if she felt agitated. and described in great granular detail what her home life was like. Her husband ignored her or talked to other girls online on his computer when he thought she couldn't see, or got really mad and threw things sometimes. He never hurt her, but he threw his computer at the wall. He was selfish, he was slovenly, he was stupid. I rarely got a chance to interject. Should I just accompany? Smile and nod, show empathy, let her work it out? She never asked me for any advice. Again, she rarely let me have a moment to say anything at all. The trouble was her husband was not in the room. Nothing would change so long as she merely vented about him. The evidence doesn't support venting as therapeutic. It tends to maintain rather than dissipating the hard feelings. So she would never feel better, and his treatment of her wouldn't change, and she wouldn't make a decision, at least not one she could not have made by herself. So, what's the point? What's the point of this therapy? So, sometimes I would interject. I'd stop her. I'd stop her with a finger. Excuse me. You've talked about Charlie for 30 minutes. Venting's not shown to be helpful, but of course, this is your therapy. You can do whatever you want with your time. Is this what you want to do with your time? She always said yes and went right back to complaining for weeks. Which for me was excruciating. About week 10, though, something in this must have landed. She didn't know what to do with therapy, what therapy is for, how it works. How could she? She wasn't a therapist. She thought that therapy was for coming in and complaining. And by asking the question, I alerted her to the possibility that therapy might be for something else. And so, consciously or unconsciously, she was contemplating, what else could I do with this time but complain? And do I want to do something with this time but complain? So, about week 10, she brought me a drawing. She'd had a dream, and she dreamed of a warrior woman, dressed in furs and leathers with a hawk on her wrist, and she drew that. She brought it. We spent about 10 minutes talking about it. And she used this sketch to discuss who she had thought she was, right? The person she was presenting me in therapy every week was not who she thought she was. This woman that she'd drawn was who she thought she was. And there was some discomfort between this ideal and this reality. So about 10 minutes of, I thought, productive discussion about that. And then, right back to complaining. Usually at the end of a session, I'll ask people, how do you think your time has been used today? How do you think today has gone? Some variation on that question. Today, though, I asked something different. No, I didn't. Shit, now I have to edit. So that lasted about 10 minutes. Back to complaining. At the end of the session, it's my practice to ask people how they thought their session has been. And so we did that. And she answered better than usual, but with no insight as to why that might be. Okay. A few weeks later, she stopped one day. Mid-complaint, she stopped one day to explain a feeling that she had, a real here and now emotion. I'm so angry with myself. And I held on to that. Honestly, like a drowning person holds on to a life preserver, but I held on to that. Tell me more. That's great. Angry? That's fantastic. Tell me more about that. What's it like? Where do you feel that? Where is it in your body? What happens when you breathe through that feeling? For almost the first time, we had something happening in the moment that we could talk about. And at the end, rather than ask about her session, I told her, today you told me about something happening now. I can't help with your husband. He's not here. And honestly, when we're just talking about him, it makes me sleepy. There's nothing I can do for you. But today I felt closer. I felt engaged because you were real. You were here with me in the room. I didn't really give her a chance to comment on it. And then slowly, sessions started to improve. Right? This was, if there's a breakthrough moment, this was the breakthrough moment. She started examining her wants. She spent more time on her ideal self versus her actual self, on the mistakes she had made. She'd been lonely and met this guy online and then moved out to be with this guy, sold her property, and it was a disaster, and he didn't love her, and she felt used. And the strong woman she used to be wouldn't have put up with that crap. Here she was. Here she was putting up with it. And she made a decision. The decision ended our therapy because she moved back where she had come from. Now, I can't help with stuff that happened long ago in the past or the future. Here, I can't help with anyone who's not in the room, and in the room is you and me. The denial of immediacy denies death. Rollo May writes in The Cry for Myth that people carry cameras. He's observing the rise of cheap camera technology and people always having cameras and always wanting to capture a moment. So they can have that moment, never lose that moment. He wrote that in the early 90s, before we all had cell phones on us all the time. Before we were posting pictures of our dinner on Instagram. Now everyone has a camera with them virtually always, and we post photos of the most banal aspects of everyday life. Today I've probably posted 2 pictures of my dogs, one of the books I'm reading for an academic chapter I have to write, and one of the way the sun bounces off my water glass. Guilty. James Hillman wrote, "Immediacy is the last great taboo." Here and now. Here, with the person I am with, now in this moment, present to them. One year on a China visit, my camera broke at the very start of a 3-week trip. I could take no pictures. Visiting China is it's special. Like, most Americans never leave the United States for any reason, and China for generations was closed to travel. And going there is something. Going there and bringing back nothing tangible to show people, it seems like a bit of a crime almost. And so here I am with no. I liked it. I liked it. Years that I've gone with cameras, I mean, it's a good tool for breaking the ice. People, especially in Western China, are very shy, and particularly when you seem like the teacher or the authority, very, very shy. And getting pictures with people breaks the ice and opens conversations. Okay. But I'd also found that I was walking around, like, when I'm in a place, I'm not in that place. I'm thinking about that place, through the lens of the camera. Like, that would make a great shot. Like, I could line that up and I could have that I could have that shot. I could show just this part of the thing. And I wasn't really immersed in the places, or even sometimes with the people, and with the camera out of the way, left in the suitcase. I was, by some measures, I was more grounded in the places with the people. It was immediate. If you have a picture of a place, have you been to that place? I'm just back from Philadelphia, and I took my brother-in-law to some museums and whatnot. And at some point, we're standing in a natural history museum, and there's this gigantic skull overhead. It's a gray whale, I think it was. This gigantic skull, and we're standing there looking up at the thing. And this guy, he's a lovely human being, and he's a bit of a shut-in. And he points at the thing and he says, "I could look that up online. Whenever I'm in a museum, I'm looking for things I could not look at pictures of online." And I wondered, not out loud, I'm a nice man, I wondered though, is that the same thing as seeing it? Is seeing a picture of a thing the same thing as seeing the thing? Is standing underneath the skull of a gray whale that stretches off into the near distance the same thing as looking at a picture of a man standing under the thing for scan? Experience cannot be captured. Experience must be lost. It happened. And then it was done. Never to happen again. Not in just the same way. Quantum, actual science of quantum, suggests that information is neither created nor destroyed. And like the quantum mysticist people want to say that means you are never destroyed, and that's just false. It's just false. That refers to like the top and bottom spin of elementary particles. It doesn't refer to the time you went to the museum and had this conversation with your brother-in-law. That is lost. It's gone. Never to reoccur. We're talking about impermanence. You can never go home again. Is that the title of a Tom Wolfe novel? Or the Buddhist aphorism, you can't stand in the same river twice. Everything changes, including us. You can't stand in the same river twice because the river has changed. It's moved on. And so have you. The you who stood there before is gone. They are just a memory, an illusion of continuity. You stand there again, but now in the light of the memory of having stood there before. The experience is different now. It cannot be had twice. I'm not much of a camper. It's been years, but maybe I'm up in the mountains. And we're in the Rockies, and there's this campsite, partway up one of the mountains, and you can sit there and look out over town and cook marshmallows and stuff. I'm up early because I'm old and I need to pee. So I'm up before everyone else, and I see the sun rising. Spectacular. The mountains are granite, and the sunrise paints them pink. There's this pink glow behind and all around, and it's cold, and I remember a scorpion walking in circles over on the concrete by the toilet building, and you can smell the campfire, hear the birds. I wake up tomorrow early. And the experience was so good, I want to have the experience again. but I can only watch the sunrise compared to yesterday's sunrise, which had no comparison. Maybe I drag my son out of the tent. Go, son, look at this sunrise. I'm so impressed. I think he'll be impressed, and he's not. He's like, oh, cool, Dad, and he takes a picture, and then he goes back to bed. Scrolls Twitter or something. Look, man, your first kiss is your last first kiss. Your kid's first birthday party is their last first birthday party. To try to pretend otherwise, to try to make the future like the past, to try to record everything so that it can be had, is the denial of death. On that note, item 6, the Cherry Blossom Festival. Tokyo sent Washington a bunch of cherry trees. I don't remember when, some historical period. And so there are these cherry trees in Tokyo and these cherry trees in Washington, and they're the same trees. And if you go to the Cherry Blossom Festival in Tokyo 100 years ago, you're going to have a very different experience than in Washington, D.C. today. I mean, the main thing is going to be the speed of travel. Like, if you're going to Tokyo, you're staying for a while. You can't just nip in and nip out, But now, travel, I mean, what's happening with our air system, notwithstanding, travel's fast and convenient, and you could go just for the Cherry Blossom Festival. In Tokyo, at least in the past, one might go to see the cherry blossoms, but stay. You would see them budding. You'd see the trees bud and then flower, blossom, and then watch the blossoms fall away and get trampled underfoot. Very important. In Washington today, one would go and try to time a visit to be at the peak bloom, the peak of the cherry blossoms. Get that perfect selfie. Convince yourself and everyone on Insta that everything is perfect in a photograph that will last forever. There's value in tracing the seasons. A lot of Japanese poetry is about capturing seasonal change in just a couple of words. Leaves turn green, then brown, then fall away. Water freezes and thaws. The trees bloom and then fade away. And these are analogs of human lifespans. These are meditations on impermanence. Certainly, Japan is not the only place this has ever happened. The old Dutch masters, the painters, when you're doing still life, you have the model, figure model, someone dressed in the things you wanted them to wear with the light perfect as you've arranged it, and or you have a bowl of fruit at the peak of ripeness and the color just as you want it to be. And as you're sketching, your job is to contemplate, to meditate upon the impermanence of this scene that you're attempting to capture. That this beautiful young person who's agreed to sit for you soon will be old. Their skin will wrinkle and spot and then slough away. The fruit, in a much shorter period of time, the flower, will wither, die, rot, never to be the same. Never to be the same. I forgot my own wedding. It was immediate. It happened. I was there. We took pictures. Man, it was the 90s. We bought disposable cameras and we handed them out. And people took pictures with those cameras and gave us the cameras at the end, and we never developed the film. It just always seemed like there would be time. I was 24. And I assumed, I didn't know anything. I assumed such an important day would just naturally lodge in memory, always be there. That camera film, it went through too much travel. Some of it was lost, some of it went through airport magnet things and x-rays. And a few years ago, I tried to develop what I could find, and it was trash. No pictures to show anyone. We stood in Boulder Creek. We hand fasted. We tied our hands together. Old Celtic thing. We each had a candle, and we used it to together light a flame in a lantern. Our flames become one. And I remember the cheap lantern we thought was so special, from Kmart or something. And I remember the rocks were slippery, and the water was so cold. Boulder Creek is ice melt, man. It was not a good idea. It was a romantic idea. It was not a practical idea. So cold. As we age, it's natural, it's normal for our memories to lose their immersive quality. They become potentiated, LTP, long-term potentiation, and they go from these immersive, high-quality experiences to descriptions of those experiences in words, just stories told in words. Even photos can't quite bring back the immediacy of that experience. So I remember the water was cold and I laugh about it, but I can't feel the painful coldness of the water. I remember that the rocks were slippery, but only in words. I cannot feel the panic of starting to lose my balance. I can't feel my wife's hand on my shoulder as she starts to lose hers. I don't remember anyone who was at that wedding except my wife. I was there. It happened. I was just assumed that I would remember. I did nothing to maintain the memory. We never really talked about it. I never reflected on it. It was just a day. A good day, a great day. Just a day in a string of days. I thought it could always be mine. At 24, I could not imagine myself at 50, struggling to come up with a word that I need, or to remember an appointment, or who was at a long ago event, or who is this person speaking to me who it seems like I should remember somehow. It's all right. That's human. It's good to immerse in experience. That's the meaning of life. Not a problem to be solved, but a reality to experience. People immersed in their experiences don't, as a rule, question the meaning of life. Will you, can you be with your client in the moment? Or will you imagine how you will phrase a line in your notes that you're compelled to write at the end of a session? That's all. Okay, bye.